Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Edwards, Ms. Walters, thank you for your courage in this issue and for exposing for the nation when things fail. Mr. Beauvais, what is the fundamental core mission of the EPA?
Protection of public health and the environment.
I see. You stated that the lead copper rule was updated in 2007, yet from our facts, we see that the lead copper rule has not been finalized in any long-term update in 25 years. Why is that?
There have been efforts to update the rule periodically over time. It was updated most recently in 2007. The long-term revisions to the rule are what we're working on right now.
What we're working on. So for 25 years we've been working on it. In the last decade, the EPA has issued about 1,000 rules a year, and yet the lead copper rule has not been finalized in 25. When do you expect that that will be done?
As I said before, my expectation is that we'll propose the rule in 2017.
Well, according to EPA's agenda that was released last fall, it stated that the agency hopes to finalize the rule in 2018. So once again, we see a moving target. We've got it, we'll take it back, we'll get back to you, we're working on it. That's not the core mission of protecting the health of people where they live, where they work, and where they recreate. In fact, we've seen in cases in Flint that General Motors determined that the water was so substandard that they shut it down. They said, we're not going to use that water. It was unfit for a work environment. And yet, we've seen procedures that have moved on that made the community even more at risk over time. Dr. Edwards, do you believe that the EPA is violating the law and its statutory requirements?
Yes, I do. I don't think they're following or enforcing the law.
What do you believe has created this shift away from the EPA's core mission?
Well, they have a very cozy relationship with water utilities. It's a good example of regulatory capture, I think. They're not listening to voices of people who have been harmed by this regulation in Washington, D.C., Durham, and Flint. And that's what happens when you listen to one group and ignore the people who are betrayed by this rule.
25 years lead copper rule has been a problem. Communities don't really have certainty. They don't have finalization. So now a patchwork of requirements exists nationwide. How do we fix it?
Well, for starters, you could enforce the existing law. The existing law would have stopped Flint. It would have stopped Washington, D.C. If it wasn't for all these extra instructions that are being added to the rule, allowing people to throw out samples for 8 different reasons, none of these things would have happened. So all I want is for them to enforce the existing law. That's all I've been requesting, and my colleagues that have been working on this for the last 10 years in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Beauvais, we've seen that there's been a statutory requirement to do updates and mandates, and yet by your testimony, we see dates all around that really don't sync with previous statements from the EPA as far as when this lead copper rule will be mandated. We've heard testimony that not only is convincing, but it's condemning to the priorities of the EPA. What's your answer to this?
I want to emphasize that it's EPA's position, and it has been EPA's position throughout this situation, that the water system in Flint was required to apply corrosion control upon making the switch to Flint River water. That is a conclusion and a view that MDEQ resisted throughout this process, and if that rule had been observed here and corrosion control had been applied, this situation would not have occurred.
And yet we have a trail of emails, Mr. Beauvais, where your own agency and Region 5 tried to belittle, obstruct, and pretty much eliminate the voices from the community, and yet now you're going to shift that to the Michigan DEQ? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Certainly, when we look back on this situation, knowing what we know now, everyone should have done everything humanly possible to avoid this situation. At EPA, we need to go back and look and understand what happened and make sure that it never happens again. But I do think it's important to remember how we got in this situation.
1991, 2004, 2007. What's it going to be again? How many more Miss Walters are we going to have to hear? Which city is next? Get the rule finalized. You owe it to the American people. We have certain expectations. And while we all have different opinions about the thousands of rules that get passed here in the last decade, I think this one with lead, copper, and drinking water is pretty important. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back my time.
Thank the gentleman.